Thank you, and I yield back my time.
Recognize Mr. Biggs for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the chairman and the ranking member for holding this hearing today. Thank each of the witnesses for being here. As I think some of you, particularly Ms. Hopper, noted, Arizona with regard to solar is highly developed, I guess I would say, compared to many of our friends, other states around the country. And people just naturally assume because Arizona gets 361 days of sunshine a year, we're going to be the leader. But we're not #1 yet, but we certainly are making advances. But I wanted to talk a little bit, and listening to the testimony, I've enjoyed listening to each of you testify today. Dr. Green said at one point the wind farms are underperforming. I don't disagree, and my research kind of indicates that as well. And I appreciate Ms. Hopper talking about regulatory reform necessary, and that'll I'll roll that back into what I'm going to say in just a second. Then Mr. Kiernan talked about transmission and store, and all of you have talked about storage. Mr. Stein and others have talked about storage. That is really critical if this is going to succeed in the long term. But I want to talk about something that's important to my home state with relationship to both solar and wind, and that is the notion of the necessity for critical minerals that go into the creation of whether it's solar panels or infrastructure and facilities for either types of solar or wind farms. So it is important that we streamline mineral development in the United States to sustain production and the infrastructure necessary to deliver energy, whether it's these green energy or traditional energy. Solar industries, for instance, are dependent on minerals including aluminum, cadmium, gallium, indium, iron, lead, nickel, silica, silver, tellurium, tin, zinc, and copper. And I bring up mining because over the last 20 years, the U.S. has doubled its import reliance to the point that we are now 100% dependent on foreign countries like China and Russia for 20 metals and minerals, many of which are essential for energy infrastructure, national security, and defense application. The President and his administration have published executive directives to begin important work on identifying immediate domestic sources for critical minerals, including the need for geophysical mapping of the United States to support management of private sector mineral exploration and to provide data for land use planning. Still, a lot of our friends on the other side of the aisle are pushing anti-mining legislation, including the friend of mine from Arizona who's the chairman of the National Resources Committee. That will crush the hard rock mining industry, impose punitive high royalties, a new dirt tax, and add more red tape to the permitting process. These minerals are critical to the future and of what you do and what you want to see happen. And just like you would like to see regulatory streamlining done in your particular fields, it seems to me that we should be looking at that with regard to mining. Right now we have a copper mine that has been waiting to go online for 15 years and has spent $2 billion and has not been able to turn a spade of dirt yet. $2 billion. So this is critical. And also we also need to recognize that there are potential environmental costs as well. Clearing land for solar energy infrastructure may have long-term effects on habitat for native plants and animals. Even in the pristine, secluded deserts of Arizona, where I'm seeing solar farms go in, there was a necessity for water as well, which is in the desert area can be very tough to get to. And in Arizona, only 4.6% of our source of energy comes from solar energy, but it's home to nuclear, 3 nuclear power reactors that produce almost 30% of Arizona's electricity while emitting no greenhouse gases. Additionally, the Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station is America's largest and employs more than 2,500 workers. The private sector, which is better equipped than the federal government to research and develop renewable energy technologies generally, is already leading the way in advancing solar and wind energy technologies. For instance, APS announced a major clean energy initiative, including new battery storage, which I think you've all talked about, and I think that's critical for the success of green energy in the future. And they intend to build additional new solar plants with storage that will deliver affordable energy to Arizonans. This initiative will add 850 megawatts of battery storage and more than 100 megawatts of new solar generation. And Secretary Perry called this a great example of an all-of-the-above approach to energy policy. In short, I think nuclear energy is also a reliable source of electricity in the United States. I appreciate each one of you and your work and your effort. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Horn.